Welcome to A Day in the Life. My name is Darren Bloomfield. I'm your host. Joining me today is Julian Sylestro, Director of Insurance and Legal Verticals at SecureWorks. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy we are getting to do this recording now. Just kind of some background. Just kind of, I find it funny, like your kind of career and, my past experiences with like the risk management majors, Gamma Iota Sigma kind of involvement. And then, well, back then, it was the NAPSLO, now kind of the WSA kind of internship. And, like we finally got to meet there at the Plus Symposium in New York. And I guess we just missed each other at Highland. So we've had a little overlap, a few years ahead of me, but yeah, I'm glad we're putting this together.
Yeah, likewise. It's not every day that I get to spend some time talking with somebody who's had such a similar background and experience of getting to see all of the cool things that the insurance industry has to offer. So excited for the discussion today.
Yeah. So as we start off, can you just kind of describe, your current role? Like what does it kind of mean? What is SecureWorks, and just kind of that specific like vertical, that specialty that you're kind of working in currently? What do you do? What is kind of your day-to-day? Who are you talking to?
Yeah, absolutely. So SecureWorks, first and foremost, is a cybersecurity firm. We offer both software as a service as well as professional services around cybersecurity needs. So the two kind of core tenets of that are our software platform called Taegis is an extended detection and response tool. It helps organizations better have optics into their environment and understand what activities are occurring within the environment, and then also alerting if there is anomalous or malicious activity occurring within the environment. So we've got that kind of product side, and we also have the services side, which is what I interact most with is the incident response team. So think the folks that go in and help organizations recover and what went wrong. A ransomware scenario, how did the threat actor get in? What have they accessed? Where have they been? Are they still in the environment? Can we kick them out? All of those types of things. So that's just kind of high level what SecureWorks is. We also have a significant arm of our organization that does threat intelligence and threat research. So we've got a team of folks who spend time analyzing, understanding threat actors, creating countermeasures, which provide additional benefits to our software customers. And so we view our activities as very much they kind of feed into one another. So our platform is informed by the professional services and research work that we do. And so it creates a very nice kind of symbiotic relationship between product and services.
Yeah. So what you're saying of just kind of like that like overlap of some of the services are being like proactive, setting up some of the controls like up front, kind of making sure that like their network is secure or more secure, maybe doing some like penetration testing like on their network to be proactive, but then also just kind of that other side of it of being kind of reactive once you're kind of in that high pressure situation and like that bad actors like in the system, like that ransomware demands filed, like they're in it. They want to get paid, and you're kind of trying to recover some of the data or just kind of see what the damage actually is.
Yep, that's exactly right. And then my role specifically is really to drive engagement between our and the cyber insurance. There's multiple, the obvious for me is engaging insurance companies, joining their panels, being able to serve, have some type of claim event. Similar, the insurance industry on our tools and resources and what they do. Cybersecurity is absolutely an arms race, and there's to get the most benefit when they go to buy insurance. Their underwriters have to understand those tools, and so there's an element of my role that is also around making sure that insurers and the industry as a whole understands what our tools do, and how they interact and how they can enhance the security of an organization. So there's that element as well. And then to kind of round that out, on the incident response side, we also engage with the legal firms. So the breach coaches that help organizations navigate through an event, make sure that they understand their regulatory requirements. We have to have a very symbiotic relationship with them as well, because they direct the customer from a legal perspective, and we help inform that direction based on the way that we conduct forensics, the way that we engage with the customer. Many times we will have boots on the ground organization, especially if customers are, on location these days. So, oftentimes we can have an additional perspective that can help those breach coaches understand, what's going on the ground at this organization, so that they can better advise those customers of what next steps to take. So that's really kind of, and it's been really rewarding. It's really an enjoyable role to get to fill. I spend an enormous amount of my time working with these partners, enjoying about broking and working with great people, helping organizations that have been hit with really difficult situations. So it's a pleasure to get to be on this side of the world and spend time helping folks in a time of really significant need.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's just kind of something that I found really interesting, or just kind of something like keep in mind, is like when these people you're interacting with, like when you're interacting with these people, your clients, your kind of the insureds, like they're not in a good place, and they're freaked out, and like I think it's a high pressure situation overall. But back to what you were saying earlier of just kind of that cybersecurity is kind of an arms race. Like I find that like super interesting, because like there's so much new technology coming out, there's so many new protocols, and then on the other side, the more creative the defense gets, the more creative kind of the attackers have to get to kind of, like, are people going to be able to bypass MFA?
Right.
Who knows? So then kind of on that side, like what you were kind of saying was with like the carriers, with the insurers, they kind of have to understand what these controls are and kind of how they work. Like you kind of have to communicate, like it's not just you that's kind of setting like the terms of it. Like you have to kind of explain what you're doing, so then like these carriers can kind of screen for it like on their applications. Like when the retailer's kind of filling out these applications, like the carrier has to know to put that question on there, or to
Right.
ask like about the security, or like, are you doing this? Because then the risk, like there's less exposure, so then hopefully the premium's lower if it's it's a safer, more kind of secure risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, I think it's really hard right now to be a cyber underwriter, especially one that has the ability and authority to write new business. I think the arms race around security controls, and the number and different types of security controls that are out there, oftentimes I think that the most difficult part of underwriting is not necessarily that first quest where a customer, responds like, hey, do you have MFA? Customer says yes or no. Difficult part of underwriting, I think, is that next question, making next question the right question, right? So yes, I understand that you say you have MFA. Well, what type of MFA do you have? Is it 2FA? Is it truly MFA? Is it based? Is it text based? Is it some other, is it a PIN that you know? So I think I certainly can empathize with underwriters about how difficult that can be to keep up with, because you're also trying to keep up with all of the things that underwriters have to do on the other side, which is risk modeling and exposure and quantification and probabilities and things like that. So, balancing can be pretty difficult, and that's something that hope can help them better navigate, and also it brings value to our clients, because I think customers that have been practicing really good security haven't necessarily always gotten the full benefit from the site. Again, because don't always dig as deep as they could. And so I think it's what I look forward to seeing is, as this market continues to mature, that customers who really are practicing good security get the true benefit of it from perspective, and that there is more, I think, stratification of what is good security versus what is bad security. Because right now I think the conversation to some extent is a little, right? Like, you either have the 12 controls that insureds want or you don't. In reality, it's much more of a, there's a million points upon a continuum at which security lives. It's not just you're either secure or you're not secure.
Yeah. So where do you kind of see that source of information kind of coming from, by with the insured, with, the CFO, CEOs kind of branching out one way, going kind of the more operations and kind of financial element of what is this company? What does it do? How much revenue does it make? How many employees, something like that. Then you have kind of the more technical path going kind of the other side of kind of the in the weeds kind of details of the chief technology officer, kind of their support staff, the cyber security staff, and then kind of the, any technology kind of support aspects of that. Where do these two paths kind of come back together? Is it the retailer to kind of bring them back together, like the broker? Is it kind of, you? Is it the carrier? Where are you seeing it kind of happen now? And then where do you kind of want it to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it happens now to a very limited degree. I don't think it happens now very consistently at all, really. And what I think going forward makes the most sense is for just honestly better alignment between security firms, between brokers, between underwriters, and honestly even up to reinsurers. I think that from time to time, and I certainly was in this camp as well. Whatever side of the business sit on, I think there's an automatic assumption that somebody in a kind of in a different role within that system. So if I'm a broker, I'm thinking, a security firm probably gets the insurance market. They probably get what I'm trying to help a customer with. And in reality, I think there's a pretty big gap in whatever side you sit on, in what you think another side knows and what they actually know. So what I think a underwriter knows and what an underwriter actually knows, there's probably a gap there. Whether it's, they know more than I think they know, or they know less than I think they know. Either way, there's a gap there. And I think that there's opportunity for alignment, and honestly just, being more engaged with each other. so that we can help strengthen the entire industry by sharing those things that we know, right? I absolutely could see a future where security firms help customers provide better data to underwriters, which helps underwriters better select risk, which ultimately leads to less losses, which stabilizes the entire marketplace, right? I think there is a real possibility of that happening. I also think that, it's really great when people go from one side of this discussion to another. And, maybe I'm a little biased because I did it myself, but I think when you have folks who grew up in security who join the cyber insurance industry, that's a good thing. Similarly, when you have folks who are, grew up in the insurance industry and they join the security side, I think that's a really good thing. I think it drives that engagement and that alignment that we all could use more of. I think there's so many nuggets in there that are beneficial for all of the parties involved. And I'm glad to see that it's happening more and more frequently. I'm glad to see that brokers are getting more engaged with security firms. I'm glad to see that underwriting and carriers are getting more engaged with security firms. You mentioned the Plus conference that we caught up at. One of the panels there that I thought was, really good was a candid kind of discussion between carriers and brokers of, hey, we really could use more support. We really could use more understanding. When you decline an account, we could use more details so that we can help a customer understand. I think that alignment is really important. It's hard to do, right? I mean, there's no about it. Like, you got to do all of your normal workday stuff, and then you also have to, find time to, spend time with other folks. But I think it's happening to a greater degree, and I'm really encouraged. And that's, one of the reasons that I think that, the cyber insurance industry is, it's absolutely here to stay, and it's going to be here for the long haul. And I think it's going to recover from the current, difficulties that the market's going through right now, in shorter order because of that interaction between security firms and insurance companies and brokers and, everybody in the equation.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's just kind of to go back and describe kind of that like gap of understanding, that disconnect between like the insurance side of the equation and kind of that security control side, is like these sides don't really know what like the other side is doing, or kind of their day to day, or like how that side like works. So there's kind of that disconnect, kind of leads to there being kind of maybe like a lack of like appreciation for kind of like, oh, why don't they know this, or kind of like assuming this, but not really exactly like knowing that. So again, like what you're kind of describing of your recent crossover to kind of more of that security control side, I think like that's awesome, of being able to kind of fill in that gap and not just like assume what the carriers or brokers or kind of insureds are doing in that insurance buying place, but knowing, because you've done it for many years. And then like that business case that you were kind of making of like that benefit of why should we do this, that more communication will kind of lead to reduction of losses, which could lead to lower premiums, which then kind of on the insured side for these businesses with lower premiums, there'll be more insurance buyers, which like something I remember from my time, like when I interned Highland there on the cyber team, was like we were kind of finding that most of our competition was the non-buyers of insurance, like the businesses that had insurance for cyber got 150% rate increase, and they decided they didn't want to renew coverage anymore because they didn't want to pay for it. Which like I get it in like the budget sense of it, but like long term, like those non-buyers are the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, the market had to have a little correction, right? I mean, when I was still broke, things obviously changed, because the first half of last year, and the market was, really experiencing a lot of pain. But the reality is, it had to happen. And you talk to any, cyber insurance or cyber risk specialist, and I think all of us, to some extent, were holding our breath for when the shoe was going to drop, right? Because cyber insurance could not continue to be, a small fraction of what controls would cost, while also not requiring those security controls, right? I think it created an adverse selection, type of environment for those insurance companies, because, a smart customer, a savvy customer could look at, an insurance policy and say, okay, well, maybe I can buy this $5 million limit for, $42,000. Well, if I want to go and buy an EDR solution for my firm, it's going to cost me $175,000. Don't I just insure against it? And, then if I have a bad day, I just go to the insurance company, I collect my payment, and I'm made whole. And it doesn't really, yeah, it hurts in the moment, but it's not so bad that, I feel compelled to buy that control. Where I think the market has gotten better is that the cost of insurance and the cost of controls are leveling out a little bit, right? And there's that minimum requirement from underwriters. So it's no longer, oh, I can buy $10 million, $20 million worth of insurance and not have to have any controls. It's like, no, you have to have the controls so that you qualify to buy the insurance. It's like, you as an organization have to show in protecting the environment, and not just, hey, I'm going to insure it and I'll give all if something goes sideways. I think an important dynamic that's going on in the market right now that not a lot of folks talk a ton about, but I think it's an important function.
Yeah. So, I mean, something I've kind of thought of too is maybe not just in cyber, but cyber specifically is just kind of that hazard of like, oh, you're buying insurance, like, instead of, because it's there, like, oh, here, I'm buying the insurance, so then they'll pay if there's a loss. But then, like, I'm going to invest this money into, like, in property, I'm going to make the sprinkler system better, I'm going to upgrade kind of the material side of it, like, oh, I'm gonna do all like the fire evacuation protocols and do all that training for my staff. And like in cyber, it would be kind of building out those controls, kind of doing those phishing exercises with your employees and everything like that. Or like take that money that you would spend on all that stuff and just kind of buy insurance and buy, more limits. What's kind of like, what do you kind of think about that? Or like where do you kind of see that going?
Yeah, I mean, I see that changing. Well, I mean, hopefully I see that changing fundamentally. I mean, when you look at, and I think, so this is where the conversation, I think, starts to get very interesting. And I think, it's easier for somebody like me, or somebody who's got a background in insurance and also studied insurance in college, to like kind of get the historical perspective, where I think we've got a little bit of an advantage, because we can look at other lines of coverage and start to take notes as far as like, well, what's the next step in the phase of development of this product line, right? When we talk about cyber insurance, I think it's important to remember that it's only 20 years, 22 years old, right? Like Lloyd's wrote the first policy in 1999 that was, a cyber insurance policy, right? So in terms of all things insurance product, it's a new product, right? It's not mature by any means. And what we see in other lines of business or in other products is a robust set of loss control measures and procedures, and even like a set of loss control things that organizations should do. We're not even there yet in cyber insurance. I think we're moving in that direction, and I think we're getting there. And I'm really encouraged by, seeing insurers not only invest in, breach response panels for assistance when a customer has a breach, but also in what they're now calling breach readiness panels, which is like full of, red teams and tabletops and incident response planning and all of those things that you can do kind of proactively. If you look at other lines of insurance, we just call that loss control, right?
Yeah.
Like you have somebody come in and they go, hey, you need a sprinkler here, you need this here, and you need that over there. That's actively what we're getting to in cyber insurance. And so I think it's interesting for me as somebody who grew up hard to and I think and that's kind of a natural progression of the maturity of a product line. And I'm glad to see it because I think it was inevitable. It had to happen. We spent a number of years going, oh my gosh, when is this market going to bottom out? Like when is the coverage going to turn around and actually become expensive enough that it's even a thought, right? Because like for a long time, it's like, here's your quote, it's $5,000 for, $150 million new company. And they're like, five rounding error, I spend that on like, when I buy my company lunch, I spend more than that, So I think that's a good development. And I think it's something I'm excited to get to support and be a part of. So I think there's really good things happening in the market. And I think it's all for the long-term health of the market. I also think that, a number of people around the cyber insurance market have kind of referred to it as a hard market. And I think there's an implication there that that means that at some point underwriting is going to go back to the way it was 3 years ago. And I just don't think that's realistic, right? Like nobody who knew much about cyber insurance or cyber risk 5 years ago, 3 years ago, thought that it was being underwritten correctly. It was just like, well, this is what the market is telling me. The market's telling me I can only ask 20 questions. Otherwise, customer's not going to fill out my application. And so they adapted and they kind of got through risk selection without much information. But I absolutely do not see underwriting ever returning to what it was, 5 years ago when you could get a quote with an organization's name, website, and
Revenue.
Annual revenue. Like that's just not happening.
Yeah, no, that's definitely really interesting. Just kind of see that progression and just kind of to recap what you were saying of kind of like that maturity of the cyber product will kind of bring around that standardization that like the other lines, like we kind of talked about in property, like it's just called loss control, and just kind of like the protection classes that property has. Hopefully, cyber will advance kind of into that. And then just kind of to shift gears a little bit now, just kind of to go back on kind of your career path and just kind of with like the brokerage side. Can you talk about when you would have been like contacted about a claim or when you would have got involved, and then kind of compare that to where you are now on that breach response panel side?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I spent 10 years in the broking seat, couple 3 years at the beginning on the wholesale side, and then the balance on the retail side. And I will say I had the luxury of being at shops, being at organizations that always had a claims leader, so somebody who could advocate for customers. But I did spend a fair amount of time supporting those folks and just making sure that from a brokerage standpoint, from a specialist standpoint, that they had as much what was, as you were placing the business, what was the underwriter's intent here? What do you how do you read this coverage? How do you read the language on this exclusion or that exclusion? So I tried to and I think appropriately so, I tried to remove myself from the equation on claim, partially because that, me getting involved when a customer had a ransomware attack was only gonna, cause a delay, right? So I think that the important thing for me was always to make sure that I was aligning customers with the right resources as quickly as I possibly could, and then just stepping back and getting out of the way, so that I wasn't causing any unnecessary or undue delays or friction throughout that process. I think it's important to also understand the value of that kind of follow up after, because at the next renewal, your customer, right? And you as a broker are going to have to help that underwriter either understand and overcome that claim situation and go, okay, well, I know we had this claim. I don't love that. My loss ratio on this account is kind of a bummer now. But how can I get them comfortable in writing that policy again? Or similarly, going to a new carrier and saying, hey, I have this customer who just had a claim. Here's why you want to write them now. I think that's really important. And what I used to try and do was make sure once the customer was kind of through their through the emergency part of their claim, tried to make sure that I encouraged them to write down notes and make sure that they were documenting what happened, what they did about it, what kind of things they did in response, what additional controls they purchased afterwards, what remediation they did afterwards, because it's so much easier to do that after it happened than to try and remember it 6, 8, 9, right? And a underwriter, when you're trying to sell them as when you're trying to sell them a deal that's got a huge claim on it, if you don't know the answer to every one of their questions, it's really easy for them to go, well, that doesn't make sense for me to get on, right? Like, if you can't make me comfortable, how am I supposed to, like, what would you like me to do? Like, be a broker, sell this deal to me, make it make sense for me.
Yeah, especially gets a lot more complicated if they're like still open, if the claims are still open, or, like either you really have to sell the account as a broker, you're gonna be met by a lot of exclusions on the underwriting side.
Yeah, right.
And kind of with your current role now, kind of being more like, I mean, I get what you were saying on like the retailer side, like you wanted to be there to support the insured, your client, but you didn't really want to get into the way of the process. But now when you're being contacted now, you're being contacted kind of for a different reason than when you were on the broker side.
Right. Yeah. Now, I mean, the conversation, the thought process around it is changed fairly drastically. And, here I do have the luxury of having a very well established and really good incident response team with a 24-hour hotline and triage team. So luckily I don't have to field phone calls at 2 a.m. But we have folks that do, and that's an important function of an incident response team is being able to be available for customers when they need them, not just normal business hours, right? Like, when a threat actor attacks, they don't care that it's 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. Yeah. That's not their concern, right? Because most likely wherever they are in the world, it's like normal business hours or whatever. So I think the urgency on this side of the business is definitely is definitely more acute than it was on the broker side. I mean, obviously I had to be engaged and involved in the broker side, but I think the urgency in getting engaged and deploying and resources is just there's a much larger lift on the incident response side. And, so folks at our firm, breach coaches, those legal firms, breach events on the kind of from a helping direct the investigation piece. Those folks all have to have the ability to respond whenever the call comes, and it doesn't matter if it's on your anniversary or on your birthday or 2 a.m. or whatever. You got to have ability to help out there. And I think firms, it can sometimes you got more redundancy. Like people, a team of 100, it's a lot easier to cover 24-hour support than a team of 5, right? It's been an interesting change of pace, and it's been fun to kind of get to experience the world on this side. It's really cool to get I think of it as kind of like the SWAT team of cyber risk. Like somebody has a ransomware issue, and our guys and gals are like boots on the ground, ready to roll. Let's help them out. And it doesn't matter a global. And so folks all around the world that are, day in and day out for customers. And it's a pretty rewarding thing to get to do, to get to help people a difficult position.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think overall, I think this conversation has been really helpful to kind of explain, those two different sides of the ball there. And then just hopefully, it's kind of inspire some other people to make that gap or that crossover to kind of come to the other side and share what they've learned.
Yeah, I would say it's also great to get an opportunity to expand your knowledge and your skill sets. I certainly, I wouldn't say that I took everything that the insurance industry had to offer in my 10 years. I think, there's so much there that you can do and you can learn. But I am glad to have gotten an opportunity to learn some different things, a different skill set. It's really rewarding. So I think, for folks that whatever side of, cyber risk you're on, I think it's great if you're thinking about a change to consider, going to a different side of the industry and experiencing that and lending your expertise there too, because that's kind of the thing is like you get to still leveraging the experience that you had in your former role. And I think that's a really unique opportunity to get to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really couldn't agree more with that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience, and thanks for your time, Julian.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Darren.